At Thanksgiving dinner, my dad said, "You're a failure, unlike your perfect cousins." Everyone laughed loudly. I just smirked and said, "Okay, then watch this." An hour later. Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house was always a battlefield disguised as a celebration. The turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce were just a backdrop to the real tradition, reminding me, in some way or another, that I was the failure of the family. It started like it always did. My father, sitting at the head of the table, cutting into the turkey with the kind of precision he never applied to his words. My mother, fussing over my cousins, Jeff and Brian, who had both built their perfect, polished lives. Jeff, the big-shot lawyer. Brian, the successful entrepreneur. They were the stars. Then there was me. I wasn't unemployed. I wasn't struggling. But in their eyes, I might as well have been. My job wasn't impressive enough, my apartment wasn't in the right zip code, and, worst of all, I wasn't married with kids like my cousins were. So, when my dad put down his fork, took a sip of his wine, and cleared his throat, I already knew what was coming. "You know, Josh," he said, staring at me like I was some kind of disappointment he had to address. "I look at Jeff and Brian and I just think, now that's success. Hardworking, respectable, making real money. And then I look at you." He trailed off, shaking his head like words failed him. But they didn't. He just wanted to drag it out, to let it linger. And then he smiled. You're just a failure." Laughter erupted around the table. Not just from him, but from my uncles, my aunts, even my cousins, those smug, golden sons of the family. I felt something in my chest tighten. The old humiliation, the kind I'd been swallowing for years. But I didn't argue. I didn't snap back. I just smirked. And I said, "Okay. Then watch this." An hour later, everything changed. The moment the words left my mouth, the laughter around the table wavered. It wasn't immediate. No, they were still riding the high of their little joke. But I saw the first hints of doubt creep into their expressions. Jeff smirked, taking a sip of his drink. "Watch what, exactly?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "You gonna tell us you finally got a real job?" Brian chuckled. "Or maybe he's gonna pull a rabbit out of a hat. A magician's career would probably suit him better." More laughter. More smugness. I just shrugged, pushed my chair back, and stood up. "Give me an hour," I said, my voice casual. "Then we'll see who's laughing." I walked out of the dining room, leaving them to exchange confused glances. They didn't know what was coming. They never did. But I did. See, what they didn't realize was that for years, I had been working on something. Something big. While they were busy dismissing me, assuming I was floundering through life, I had been quietly building something behind the scenes. And tonight? Tonight was the perfect moment to unveil it. I stepped into my childhood bedroom, the one they never bothered to redecorate, as if to remind me I still belonged there, and pulled out my laptop. With a few clicks, I set everything in motion. Back in the dining room, the conversation had already moved on without me. They were probably still making jokes at my expense, clinking their glasses, basking in their self-importance. But in exactly 58 minutes, everything would shift. And this Thanksgiving dinner? It was about to become legendary. I took my time before heading back to the dining room, letting them stew in their own smugness a little longer. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression calm. I had waited years for this moment. I wasn't going to rush it now. When I finally stepped back in, they barely noticed. My father was still holding court, laughing with my uncles about. Back in his day, when people had real work ethics. Jeff and Brian were competing over who had the biggest business deal lined up next quarter. My mother was hanging on to their every word, practically glowing with pride. Then came the first sign. A sharp ding from a phone. Then another. Jeff, the big-shot lawyer, frowned and pulled his phone out of his pocket. His brow furrowed as he read something on the screen. Brian did the same, and I watched as his smirk slowly faded. What?" Brian muttered, tapping furiously at his phone. Jeff's face darkened. "Hold on. This has to be a mistake." I casually took my seat again, resting my elbows on the table. "Something wrong, guys?" Brian looked up at me, bewildered. "Why is my company's name trending on Twitter?" Jeff's head snapped up. Why is mine trending? My father, always slow to pick up on anything digital, scoffed. Oh, come on. What could possibly be so bad that you two look like you've seen a ghost? Jeff turned his phone around, his knuckles going white as he gripped it. There, in bold letters, was a headline from a major news site. Exposé, inside the shady deals of rising corporate stars. And right underneath? Jeff's company. Brian's company. And next to them, screenshots, leaked emails, evidence. Every underhanded deal they had ever made. Every time they cut corners. Every time they exploited a loophole. It was all there. Jeff shot up from his chair. This is a setup, he snapped, his face turning red. Who the hell leaked this? I just smiled, took a slow sip of my drink, and said, Told you to watch. And just like that, the mood in the room shifted. No more laughter. No more smugness. Now they were the ones squirming. The room, once filled with smug laughter and self-congratulatory toasts, had turned ice cold. My father, who had been chuckling at my expense only minutes ago, now looked between Jeff and Brian with narrowed eyes. Jeff, always the smooth talker, was frantically swiping at his phone. This is ridiculous. These are private emails. How the hell did someone get these? Brian's face had gone pale. He wasn't even speaking, just staring at the headlines, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. My father, oblivious as ever, frowned. What's going on? What are these emails? Jeff hesitated. He didn't want to explain it. Didn't want to admit that his success wasn't built entirely on merit but on backdoor deals, questionable contracts, and in at least one case, outright fraud. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Oh, you mean those emails about falsified legal documents? Or the one about how you knew your company's product was faulty but rushed it to market anyway? I tilted my head toward Brian. Or maybe Brian's messages where he straight up admitted to bribing inspectors so his real estate projects wouldn't get delayed? My mother gasped. That's not true. I shrugged. I don't know, Mom. The emails say otherwise. I turned back to Jeff and Brian. I mean, this is really interesting stuff. And it looks like the media agrees. I gestured at their phones. Those headlines are spreading fast. People love a good scandal. Brian finally snapped out of his stunned silence. You did this, he hissed, his eyes burning with rage. Jeff shot me a glare, pointing an accusing finger. You're the only one who would have had a reason. How the hell did you even get these emails? I smirked. Oh, wouldn't you like to know? Truth was, I didn't hack anything. I didn't have to. They had been careless enough to leave incriminating files sitting on shared drives, careless enough to send sensitive messages over unsecured channels. All I did was find what was already there. A few well-placed contacts, a little patience, and suddenly, I had a front-row seat to their corruption. But I wasn't about to explain that. Jeff turned to my father, desperate now. Dad, you know I would never. But my father wasn't looking at him. He was looking at me. And for the first time in my entire life, he wasn't looking at me with disappointment. He was looking at me with fear. The weight of the silence at that table was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It was almost suffocating. The very same people who had been laughing at me, who had spent years dismissing me, were now frozen in place, their world shifting under their feet. My father, the man who had built his entire existence on control, was no longer in charge of the room. His eyes flicked between Jeff and Brian, then back to me. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out whether this was salvageable. How? He started, his voice low, measured. How much of this is real? Jeff shot me a glare, his jaw clenched. None of it! This is a hit piece, Dad! Some jealous competitor must have. Shut up! My father's words cut through the air like a knife. Jeff flinched. And that's when I knew. He wasn't asking if it was true because he doubted it. He was asking how much of it was true because he already knew his sons weren't clean. He just wanted to know how bad it was. Brian groaned, rubbing his face with both hands. This can't be happening. I have investors. If this sticks, I could lose everything. Oh, don't worry, I said casually, tapping on my phone. It's already sticking. Jeff was still furiously scrolling through his screen, his face going from red to ghostly pale. No. No, no, no. Yeah, I interrupted. That major contract you just signed? Looks like your clients are already pulling out. I turned my phone toward him, showing the first wave of public statements. We do not condone unethical business practices and are reevaluating our partnership with. Jeff shot up from his chair, knocking over his wine glass. You ruined me, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. I raised an eyebrow. I ruined you? Buddy, I didn't tell you to commit fraud. I just made sure the world noticed. Brian slammed his fist on the table. Why would you do this? What the hell do you even gain from this? I leaned forward, my smirk never fading. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I just got really tired of being the failure of the family. My father stood up slowly, rubbing his temples like he was fighting off a migraine. I could feel his anger bubbling, but this was different. This wasn't the kind of anger he directed at me every Thanksgiving. This was something deeper. Because he wasn't just mad. He was worried. And that was new. I met his gaze. Still think I'm the disappointment? His lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't answer. But he didn't have to. For the first time in my life, I had silenced him. My father sat back down, his fingers steepled as he stared at me like I was a puzzle he had never quite figured out. The rest of the table was deathly silent. My mother looked between us, eyes wide, like she had just realized the ground beneath her was crumbling. Jeff, still standing, was breathing hard, his fists clenched. You think this makes you better than us? He spat. You think this makes you some kind of hero? I shrugged. I don't need to be a hero. I just needed to make sure the truth came out. Brian groaned, dragging a hand through his hair. Oh, shut up, Josh. What do you even know about business? You have no idea what it takes to succeed at this level. Maybe not, I admitted. But I do know what happens when you build that success on lies. Jeff scoffed. Oh, please. You act like you're so much better, but what have you actually done with your life? You work some boring job, live in a tiny apartment and… I slid my phone across the table. Brian caught it before it could skid off the edge, frowning at the screen. Jeff leaned over his shoulder, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. What is this? Jeff muttered. Oh, that? I said, feigning innocence. That's my company's valuation. Just hit 8 figures last quarter. Not bad for a failure, huh? My mother actually gasped. My father's eyes widened. Even my uncles, who had been mostly silent until now, exchanged stunned glances. Brian shook his head in disbelief. No. No way. There's no way you… Surprise, I said, smirking. See, while they had spent years looking down on me, assuming I was floundering, I had been building something real. Something legitimate. I had co-founded a tech startup a few years back. We had flown under the radar, securing small investors, steadily growing, until this year, when we landed a major contract that changed everything. I had kept it quiet. Partly because I wanted to avoid their judgment. But mostly because I had wanted this moment. Jeff and Brian had spent their entire lives propped up by family connections, shady deals, and loopholes. Me? I had built something from the ground up, without cutting corners. And now I was ahead. Jeff sat back down, his face blank, like his brain was refusing to process what he was seeing. Brian just muttered. No way. This isn't happening. My father finally spoke, his voice low. Why didn't you tell us? I met his gaze. Would you have listened? He didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. They had never wanted to see me succeed. They had wanted me to stay the failure. The scapegoat. The one they could mock and compare their golden sons to. But now the script had flipped. And they had no idea what to do about it. The silence at the table stretched so long it felt like the air had thickened, trapping them in the weight of reality. My father, usually so quick to have the last word, looked like he was searching for something, anything, to say. My mother was still staring at the phone in Brian's hands, as if she expected the numbers on the screen to change. Like she couldn't accept what she was seeing. And Jeff? Jeff was seething. This is a joke, he muttered, shoving my phone back toward me. There's no way you built something worth that much. If you had, we'd know about it. I smirked. Would you? Because every time I talked about my work, you all tuned me out. I gestured at my father. You even told me last year that real men don't waste time on tech nonsense. He opened his mouth, but for once, he had nothing to say. Brian exhaled sharply, shaking his head like he was still trying to wake up from a bad dream. All right, fine. Let's say it's real. Let's say you do have a company. He leaned forward. Why this? Why go out of your way to ruin us? I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. I didn't ruin you. You did that to yourselves. I gestured to their phones. I just made sure the world saw it. Jeff's face twisted with fury. You think you're some kind of saint? That you're better than us? I shrugged. No. But I didn't commit fraud. I didn't bribe inspectors. I didn't lie to investors. I leaned in slightly. And I definitely didn't spend my whole life tearing someone down only to be blindsided when they fought back. My father exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples like he was holding back a migraine. Josh, he said, his voice low, measured. Do you have any idea what you've done? I tilted my head. Yeah. I finally evened the playing field. His expression darkened. No. You just started a war. I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. I just smiled. Good, I said. I already won. My father's face hardened. He wasn't used to this, to me holding the upper hand. His whole life, he had built himself up as the untouchable authority in the family. His word was law. His judgments were final. But now, he was just another man scrambling to control a situation that was already out of his grasp. Jeff pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his breath coming fast and uneven. This isn't over, he hissed. I will fix this. I raised an eyebrow. Fix it? I gestured toward his phone. It's already out there. You can't unring that bell, Jeff. Brian shook his head, muttering to himself. His eyes darted back to his phone, scanning for updates, as if somehow the headlines would disappear if he refreshed the page enough times. No, there's got to be a way to spin this, he mumbled. A PR statement, damage control. I let out a low chuckle. Oh, you can try. But you might want to check your inbox first. Jeff snatched his phone back out of his pocket, and, after a few taps, his entire body went rigid. Brian followed suit, and as soon as he saw whatever was on his screen, his face drained of all color. My father narrowed his eyes. What now? I folded my arms. Let's just say, your son's investors aren't thrilled about all this. Jeff's chair screeched as he shoved it aside. You absolute. Careful. I cut in smoothly. Wouldn't want to say something you can't take back. He stopped, shaking with barely contained rage. Brian sat frozen, staring at his phone like he was watching his empire crumble in real time. And in a way, he was. Because what they were seeing, those weren't just articles. They were termination emails. Severed business ties. Clients, investors, partners, jumping ship before they could be dragged down with them. This wasn't just bad press. This was the end. And they knew it. My father's hands curled into fists on the table. His expression had shifted now, not just anger, but something deeper. Fear. For the first time in his life, he was looking at me and realizing he had underestimated me. For years, they had written me off. Laughed at me. Mocked me. Now, I was the one standing while they fell. And it felt. I won't lie. It felt incredible. The tension in the room had shifted into something almost unbearable. My father's usual air of authority had crumbled, replaced by a brittle silence. Jeff and Brian sat frozen, their minds racing, trying to grasp how fast their worlds had collapsed. They had always believed they were untouchable. That their money, their connections, their status would protect them. But now, reality was setting in. Jeff, still gripping his phone like it was a lifeline, suddenly slammed it down onto the table. The sharp thud echoed through the room. His nostrils flared as he glared at me. You think you're so damn smart, don't you? His voice was low, venomous. You think just because you got lucky with some stupid startup, you're better than us? I sighed, tilting my head. See, that's the problem, Jeff. You still don't get it. This isn't about luck. It's about choices. You chose to cheat your way to the top. And now you're paying for it. Brian finally found his voice, though it was shaking. You don't understand what you've done, Josh, he muttered. We have families. Responsibilities. This isn't just about us. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, now you care about consequences? That's rich. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. Did you think about that when you lied to investors? When you bribed officials? When you cut corners that could have put real people at risk? Brian flinched but didn't answer. I turned to my father. And you? You spent my entire life telling me I was a failure. Mocking me. Comparing me to them. I gestured toward my crumbling cousins. Tell me, Dad, what do you think now? For a long moment he didn't speak. Just sat there, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he exhaled, shaking his head. You were never supposed to win. The words were barely above a whisper, but they hit harder than if he had shouted them. My stomach clenched. He didn't say he was wrong. He didn't say he regretted anything. Just that I was never supposed to win. I let out a slow breath, sitting back. Well, I said evenly. Looks like I did. Jeff pushed his chair back so violently that it nearly tipped over. This isn't over, he growled, his face red with fury. You think you've won just because you embarrassed us? Because you got some headlines? I shrugged. Oh, I think I've done more than that. He turned to my father, desperate now. Dad, say something. He's tearing this family apart. But for once, my father had nothing to say. Because deep down, even he knew the truth. The family had been torn apart long before tonight. They just never expected to be on the losing side. The room felt like a battlefield after the dust had settled, silent, heavy with the weight of what had just unfolded. My father looked old. Not just in years, but in defeat. His authority, his control over this family, it was gone. Jeff and Brian sat motionless, still processing the fact that their careers, their reputations, had been shattered in a single night. And me? I felt lighter than I ever had before. For years I had been their punching bag, the one they could mock to make themselves feel superior. I had spent my whole life waiting for them to see me, to acknowledge my worth. Now they had no choice. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. Well, I said, my voice calm, steady. I think that about wraps up Thanksgiving. Jeff's fists clenched at his sides, but he didn't move. Brian was still staring at his phone, as if willing the news to change. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came. Even my father, the man who had spent years belittling me, remained silent. Because for the first time in his life, he had nothing to hold over me. I turned toward the door, then hesitated. Just for a second. There was a time when I would have given anything for their approval. For a moment like this, where they finally realized I wasn't a failure. But looking at them now, I didn't need it anymore. I smiled, just a little. Oh, and Dad? He looked up, his face unreadable. I held his gaze. You were right about one thing. A pause. Then I smirked. I was never supposed to win. And with that I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of the empire they had built. And proving, once and for all, that I was never the failure they thought I was. I was just the only one who played fair. And in the end, I still won.